Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. We're just going to wait 30 seconds for everybody to log in, and then we're going to start our topic of discussion for today. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. Today, we have two special guests with us. We have Alf DeBlasis and Jeremy St. Louis. We're going to be discussing the new spectrum of soccer viewing, how the game is consumed in a multi-screen digital world. Jeremy, Alf, good afternoon. Happy New Year. Welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Valerio. It's great to be with you, and it's great to connect with the former colleagues of mine at the NSCAC once again. Welcome to all your viewers.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to join, and I hope everybody's keeping warm up there.
Okay, so I think let's open up by discussing how has the evolution of broadcasting changed in the way the soccer fan or the soccer consumer is getting access to various live leagues around the world.
Right, I'm going to start sharing the PowerPoint presentation that I set up for this, and Jeremy and I are going to kind of alternate as we go through it, but we wanted to kind of give everyone a sense of where soccer coverage started in terms of the distribution of the game across various platforms, and where we are now, and what can you look forward to in terms of how to access soccer as a consumer, as a fan, as a follower of the game. So if we go back to the early or the late 70s and early 80s, traditional networks were generally the ones that broadcast live soccer through that period of time, and most of the events were the major events: the World Cup, the European Championships, the North American Soccer League, which was at its height at the time through North America, and some of the traditional networks, of course, in Canada, CBC and CTV, and of course the big three networks in the United States, followed then by Fox. Were some of the major carriers and providers of soccer, both domestic and international. There were also some minor independent outlets who offered soccer as well in those days, and I was fortunate enough to be involved with a company called CFMT International, or what was known as MTV or Channel 47 at the time. And we broadcast games, live games at the time, although it was kind of a bit of a limited schedule in terms of what we were able to offer. We had live FA Cup finals. We had some European Cup finals live as well. And we also did a few editions of the World Cup live as well. But our main focus was on providing soccer highlights on a weekly basis, and generally, because of the nature of the way things were set up at the time, we had week-old highlights, if you can believe it. Now, of course, you can get highlights that are virtually a minute old and be able to watch them almost live. But that was our situation at the time, and there were other kind of independent providers at the time, and some of the viewers who are looking in right now who remember at the time, and who particularly live in Southern Ontario, will remember that CHCH in Hamilton was kind of the pioneer for Serie A soccer. Italian League soccer first appeared on the airwaves on CHCH. And PBS, which is the public broadcasting system in the United States, which is also available to some border cities in Canada, had a product at the time called Soccer Made in Germany. And it was German League soccer, tape delayed, edited, but an opportunity for us in North America to be able to watch what is now the Bundesliga. And so there were some, as I said, independent outlets that provided some soccer coverage in addition to some of the major traditional networks. As we moved into the late 80s, early 90s, and on into the 2000s, sports specialty networks became prominent, and particularly here in Canada, obviously with TSN and Sportsnet later on, and the United States with ESPN in particular. And TSN had the rights to Canadian men's and women's national team games, as well as national rights to the Canadian Soccer League, which was the predecessor, let's say, to what is now the Canadian Premier League. But at the time, TSN had coverage rights for that particular league. And then TSN and Sportsnet would kind of split the Canada men's and women's national teams packages. ESPN obviously had access to US men's and women's national teams. And in the inaugural year and subsequent early years of Major League Soccer, they broadcast MLS games as well. Eventually, Fox entered the picture and spun off a series of channels, including Fox Soccer Channel. And Jeremy, I think, can give us a little bit of a background, because he was involved in that process with Fox, and then eventually moved on to another significant player in soccer coverage, and that is beIN Sports. So Jeremy, why don't you kind of fill us in on what Fox Soccer Channel and Fox Soccer Report, where you worked at, provided in terms of soccer coverage through those years?
Well, just after 9/11, as it turned out, we were supposed to launch Fox Sports World Canada the week of 9/11. And so we had to push it back, obviously, because of what happened in the United States. But you talk about the digital specialty channels that were prominent at the time. And in Canada, that was Fox Sports World Canada, which came on, which was affiliated with Fox Sports International. And for us in Winnipeg, of all places, is where we were based, because that's where CanWest Global was based. And that's who owned all of those digital specialty channels, was Global Television. And so we were based in Winnipeg to do a little show there that started off as Global Sports Link, and then morphed itself into what became Fox Soccer Reports. For the first year or so, couple years, the Sports Link program was simply, I think it was 4 days a week we started out as, then it went to 5, and then it went to 7. And eventually what happened with Fox Sports World, which was what we were basically partners with in the United States, Fox Sports World then rebranded to Fox Soccer Channel, and then our show became from Global Sports Link to Fox Sports World Report. And that's where it was, for the duration of its run, on as long as Fox Sports World Canada existed. But our partnership with Fox Soccer Channel is really kind of what carried us into the United States. We were the only show of its kind that was able to broadcast across both borders, produced mainly for Fox Soccer Channel, because after a couple of years in Canada, they kind of saw that there was a market, because of the fact that it wasn't as divided as it is now, for a sports highlight show that was simply based around soccer and analysis. And that's where you had the likes of Bobby McMahon kind of join us and, make his name in terms of soccer analysis, and what he was able to do with us on Fox Soccer Report. I still get people to this day. That show's been off the air for 10 years or so, or close to it, I think. And I still get people to this day that come up to me and ask me about Bobby and about that show. But at that time, there was a market for that type of highlight show. And so that's what we kind of capitalized on. We had the resources of Fox Sports World to kind of help us with that. So, we were getting highlights from South America. We were getting highlights from Europe, of course, which was the bread and butter for us. And then, basically from major tournaments like the Champions League, the Europa League, which was the UEFA Cup at the time. And then, of course, the World Cups, and kind of piggybacking off of the coverage from the likes of ESPN. And then in 2012 is when beIN Sports kind of made a play in the United States. Many people here in North America, really, if you don't follow soccer, you don't really know much about beIN Sports, but beIN Sports is just quite simply the largest sports network on planet Earth. They're based in Qatar. They've got offices and outlets, Spain, Turkey, the Middle East and North Africa, Europe. They've got a big hub in Paris. So they've got stuff all over Indonesia, Australia. They are, a major provider of sports outside of North America. And they wanted to get their foothold here in North America, seeing that there was space for them because of what was happening with networks like Gold TV, basically kind of not having the money to kind of get the rights that they needed in order to, to continue to be a player in the North American soccer television market. beIN had the backing of the Qataris, who, of course, I don't want to say have endless money, but they certainly have a lot of it. And so they have all the rights for everything that you can think of in Qatar, in the Middle East and North Africa. And then coming into the American market, they figured they could just buy up the rights here, but quickly found out that that's not the case. Here in North America, rights are very sought after and they're very lucrative, particularly when it comes to the 5 major North American sports. So they decided to focus on soccer and had the rights to Ligue 1, La Liga, Serie A, and then Copa Americas. We did some World Cup coverage around the rights holders here, but outside of North America, beIN Sports has the World Cup rights. So we're able to piggyback off of that. But beIN Sports kind of put themselves in, they kind of stepped into the market with a big splash. And, they've been able to maintain a decent share of market. But now with ESPN kind of expanding through ESPN Plus, you're seeing ESPN buy up a lot of the rights here in the United States and then feature them on their digital platforms like ESPN Plus. Just this week, there's rumors about La Liga leaving beIN and going to ESPN Plus. So it seems like right now the rights are kind of being scooped up by one particular player, but a place like beIN Sports, with the 3 leagues that we had a highlight show, we had analysis and everything like that. We were able to provide the soccer viewer with the kind of analysis that we had also been able to provide with the Fox Soccer Report. After Fox Soccer Report went off the air, I commented to my bosses at beIN Sports that there was a need for this kind of show, even though the market had changed, as Alf talked about with the highlights. You were looking at getting them, up to a week late and now to the minute. And that's kind of what we were looking at in terms of trying to integrate technology. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But in terms of what beIN Sports was able to offer, it was able to offer great analysis, and with the backing of the Qatar beIN Sports, bring in real soccer personalities like big names. I worked with Tony Adams, Christian Vieri, Ruud Gullit, Luis Garcia, a number of people that would come through, Michel Salgado. So they had that kind of clout to bring in the big names, which of course helped their broadcasting in terms of bringing in these names, which obviously lent credibility to what beIN Sports was able to do. But as Alf can certainly talk about, the pie continues to be divided.
Yeah, and we should mention, Jeremy, that the beIN also had a complimentary service in Spanish, as there are a number of other Spanish language channels available across North America, including Univision and so on, which also provide soccer coverage. And we'll get into the sort of language aspect of things a little bit later on. But I wanted to carry on from there as beIN was becoming a force in North America in terms of soccer coverage. All of a sudden, a number of other outlets started appearing. And here we're talking about OTTs, or over-the-top networks and apps and streaming services that started evolving through the 2010s and really have become the prominent carriers of soccer into the 2020s. And Jeremy mentioned ESPN Plus. We're also talking about DAZN. DAZN is now a major player in terms of North American soccer coverage. They have the EPL, they have the Champions League, they have Serie A rights here in Canada. And we also look at another outlet that spun off from NBC Sports, and that is the NBC Sports Network, which is a major holder of the English Premier League in the United States. And more recently, a number of other kind of minor sports networks have come into the picture and are providing various products, including NCAA college soccer, major arena soccer. We're talking about Flow Sports and 11 Sports. And most recently, CBS has spun off a service called CBS All Access, which is now providing the exclusive rights to the Champions League across the United States. And perhaps, Jeremy, you can pick up on that discussion and give us a sense of what CBS is going to be doing with the Champions League across the United States.
Well, CBS was a network that was into soccer back in the NASL days, back in the 70s. And you know, the guy who was in charge of acquiring the Champions League rights for CBS now, I think his father was a play-by-play guy back in the days, the early days of CBS in the early 70s, and kind of helped with that. So there's a long love of soccer at CBS. They just haven't been a major player in the market, and they saw that the Champions League was kind of up for grabs, and so they surprised everybody by coming in for the Champions League and a very, very aggressive plan with how they want to basically cover off every niche for the soccer consumer. On top of what you would see on CBS All Access, they're not doing any games on the network. The final will be on the network, but the games themselves, all of the games, you have your selection on CBS All Access, which they charge, I think, $5 a month for. So, I mean, you have access to all the games. That they've developed a whip around channel as well, kind of like NFL Red Zone, but with the group stage of the Champions League. So they had a host, they had an analyst, and they're basically just taking you from game to game to game as the goals kind of went in. If there were no goals, because obviously soccer is not like traditional American football. You're not getting a team in the red zone all the time. You know, they'd whip around to different games where, you know, maybe there was the opportunity or the potential for things to turn around. So they have the whip around show, they have the games, they have pregame, halftime, postgame. That's on All Access. Then the network, the part of CBS that I currently work for, CBS Sports HQ, is the digital network that is online only. We also have a show, pregame show, that goes on that. That's accessible on your phone, tablet, computer, whatever. And no highlights on that show, but there is pregame, halftime, and postgame shows on there with a number of different analysts, but North American based. The Champions League stuff you're seeing on All Access is European based. The Whip Around show also based in London. And then they've also got a podcast as well that they've started up called Que Golazo. So they're really covering off as many avenues as they can to try to get the consumer the games that they want to see in kind of an on-demand format. Now, there is obviously a certain section of the viewer that wants to see games on CBS, traditional cable television, but recognizing that that most soccer fans want to have their choice of games versus CBS picking it for you, they've given people the opportunity for $5 a month to basically just pick whichever game you want. And so far, it's proving to be quite a success. And CBS went into this, I mean, they're the oldest sports network, you know, the oldest sports provider in North America in terms of what they do, but they don't reinvent the wheel. If you watch anything that's CBS, whether it's golf, college basketball, football, they're not reinventing the wheel. They're simply doing what the viewer wants. They're not trying to complicate things with trails on balls or anything like that. They're just trying to keep it simple because they know that that's what the viewer wants. The viewer just wants to see the game, and then just trying to build little things around it that can give the viewer the total experience that they want. And so far, based on the feedback that we've received at CBS, it has been highly successful. And the company is setting a new bar in terms of how the Champions League is not only being consumed, but how it's being covered.
Now, over and above some of the traditional networks and new streaming services and applications and OTTs that are coming on board, organizations themselves have established their own viewing platforms, and UEFA TV, UEFA through a provider has now started UEFA TV, and they're providing coverage of several significant events and tournaments, including the Nations League, which was available free to UEFA TV subscribers. FIFA has also pledged to begin a streaming service under their banner, and they expect to launch sometime this year, FIFA TV. And what they plan to show are generally some of the lesser competitions, obviously under the FIFA banner, the youth tournaments, the under 17s, under 20s, some esports tournaments, which are starting to become very popular. And of course, they have this massive catalog of World Cup games, so they'll be able to show classic World Cup matches and World Cup films that they have in their inventory. The other player, significant player right now, is YouTube, and this is really the sort of the preferred platform for sports content for Generation Z, or the group or demographic that has basically grown up through the 2000s and are now becoming prominent viewers and prominent players in terms of the consuming of soccer coverage. And at least 50% say that they use YouTube several times a week to get their sports content. So that's an interesting kind of extension to where soccer is being followed. There's another very popular outlet, and that is Twitch, which is largely a gaming site, but has also indicated that it's going to get into the distribution of the sports and specifically soccer coverage. Now we move into the next area, which is these streaming giants that are acquiring key properties and investing in the development of original content. We're talking about Amazon Prime Video and Netflix. And Amazon is becoming a pretty significant player in the coverage of soccer. They've bought up some EPL rights as well as some Champions League rights. And in fact, Amazon just paid $95 million per season to broadcast the top games on Wednesday in the Champions League in Italy. So that's a pretty sizable investment for a streaming service that really has been known for television series and movies and so on, and is now entering the sports realm, and particularly in soccer. And we also look at Netflix as an emerging player, because they were the first to bring a soccer documentary to viewers. Back in 2018, they launched a title called First Team, which was the documentary of Juventus over the course of a season, and they actually duplicated it and came out with a second season of that particular documentary. And of course, we are familiar with Last Dance, which is the Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary, which appeared on Netflix in cooperation with ESPN last year. And Netflix actually ended 2020 with over 200 million subscribers, generating a revenue of $25 billion. And that obviously was a move to these platforms that was prompted by COVID last year, and the fact that sports was shut down for so long, and there was a move to non-live original content and behind-the-scenes documentaries. The shift now on the part of these particular players is to high-demand, exclusive, promotable content, and that means live sports. And they're looking to attract a whole new set of subscribers with their offerings of live sports. And in fact, I can confirm that both Amazon and Netflix are bidding right now for the Serie A rights for the next 3-year cycle, beginning with the 2021-22 season. So the transition that we're seeing right now is that a great number of people are doing what's called cutting the cord, and in fact, many people are not having access to basic cable. They're choosing not to do that, and they're looking at streaming options and different avenues by which they can consume sports. And really, in the future, fans will likely subscribe to 3 or maybe even 4 streaming services that will include sports. And we're starting to see with the recent announcement that NBCSN is actually going to discontinue at the end of this year. We're starting to see some industry consolidation. We're seeing the emergence of a new streaming service called Peacock, which is under the NBC banner. So most of the sports coverage that's on NBCSN right now is going to migrate over to Peacock, which is this brand new streaming service, and they're going to collect up to 80 million subscribers that are currently on that service. So there's quite a bit of a change in terms of the industry, in terms of who becomes significant players. There is a third streaming service that is comparable to Netflix and Amazon, and that is Apple TV. But they've yet to sort of determine how much investment, if any investment, they're going to make in sports coverage. I wonder if we want to take just a quick break, Valerio, and see if there are any questions to come up at this point before we start into the next section, because we've covered a lot of ground there in terms of where we're watching soccer and who the current players are. And if anyone has any questions, we're open to them now.
If anybody like to pose a question, feel free to post it either in the chat section of your function or the question and answer. I just have a comment, Alf. I think, all the information you guys are presenting is fantastic. And I think with rising costs in cable companies, and the shift in how everybody wants access to something now, you're seeing a lot more of these apps featuring live games. So somebody can watch a game on their phone, or somebody can watch it on their iPad, and they don't have to be at home on the couch watching it. They could be watching these games anywhere. And I think you're seeing a shift because of how technology is changing, but also how society is changing on how they want to go about in consuming or watching a game. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key aspect right now, if I can jump in, and Jeremy, by all means, jump in if you have an option as well, is that the fact that mobility right now is the key aspect, I think, in terms of how we consume and how we view sports. You have the opportunity to be able to find and select from soccer coverage or in general sports coverage from a variety of different devices. And, we'll have a section on that in a minute. But mobility, I think, is the key aspect in terms of being able to access sports on your laptop, on your phone, on your tablet, on a variety of different aspects that, that you can take the game with you wherever you are.
And I think to follow along with that, Alf, it's not just live sports. I mean, live sports are always going to be, the thing that people will gravitate towards. Dramas are dramas, and television can talk about ratings for different programs, but live sports are something that are never going to go away. There's always going to be the consumption of live sports. And I think what a lot of the networks have kind of cued in on, and Netflix and certainly Amazon have cued in on this. NBC to a lesser extent, not so much with soccer right now, but they've done it more with the NHL, and we always see it with HBO and the NFL doing Hard Knocks, is that specialized documentary style feature programming to carry the viewer from one week to the next. So you can watch a game. I told this story to Alf and Valerio when we were talking about the presentation, and that my dad, who's 70 years old, who does not follow soccer at all, happened to stumble across Sunderland Till I Die on Netflix and watched it and called me and said, "Do you happen to know who this Sunderland team is?" And I'm like, yes, Dad, I do happen to know who Sunderland is. And he's like, "Well, I think I'm going to be a fan of them now because I've watched this documentary." So I think that what the networks too are kind of helping with that is gain new fans. And if you have a new fan of Sunderland, well, now they're going to want to see Sunderland games. Well, where are they going to see those games? They're going to have to subscribe to this. So I think that mobility, but also to the feature content, is something that's become really big as well. And I think we're going to see more of that, not just from networks, but from particular club websites as well as we start to move forward.
Yeah, I think it's important to try to keep the consumer, not the fan, because the fan is always going to watch soccer whenever they want. But I think a consumer or a new fan it's important to keep that engagement going from game to game. So what are they doing in between? If Serie A is every Sunday, well, what are they doing from Saturday to Saturday to try to keep that consumer engaged in wanting to watch another Serie A game the following Sunday?
Yeah, excellent point.
One of the things that I think that the networks, this is something that HBO has perfected with the NFL in terms of Hard Knocks, because you have that preseason, but those shows are very immediate. Those shows are like a week old. So the content for those is actually quite relevant. And I think that that's kind of where the networks and even the teams to a lesser extent still have to kind of perfect, is being able to get that quick turnaround, which is going to significantly help engagement. If your team's got a game on Sunday and on Tuesday you're able to watch a show, or even on Monday watch a show about what happened during that game, then they play in the Champions League on Wednesday, then there's a show on Friday about that experience, and then maybe looking towards the weekend. There you've got the consumer all week long, carrying them from game to game to game. And that's something I think that still a lot of teams and a lot of networks are going to have to try and perfect.
Yeah, and the other thing I like is I've watched the whip around show on CBS Sports with the Champions League, and I think for a consumer or trying to engage a new fan, I think it's a fantastic idea, because a soccer fan who loves a team will sit and find their team and watch it. But when you're trying to engage a new consumer, a new fan to the game, they just want to watch goals, or they want to see clips of each game. So the way CBS is doing it right now, and I've watched quite a bit of it on Champions League the last few months, is fantastic, because it allows you to watch snippets of every single game live.
Yeah, I think if we move into the next section, when we talk a little bit about what we watch, and this might have some relevance in particular to your coaches in terms of advancements and techniques and innovations in soccer broadcasting. And of course, we used to be able to watch soccer in what was called standard definition. Then there was sort of this graduation to high definition, which allowed us to watch games with much more clarity. We're now at a point where we have the dawning of 4K, which is the highest resolution of television possible. And you'll probably notice some of you will have 4K channels available on your cable services. If you have a 4K television, you'll be able to watch those channels now. But that is kind of the future, and will become the new standard of how we're going to be able to watch soccer in future. In terms of techniques, what we're seeing in a lot of cases, and in particular, Major League Soccer experimented with AR, augmented reality, as the delivery of the game begins to change. And during the 2020 playoffs, they actually provided a game stream that featured enhanced data. And as you see on the screenshot here, every kind of player, or specific players, were highlighted with their names above them, and a lot of interesting data was provided in kind of video game like elements, and they introduced certain advanced video tools that MLS coaching staffs actually were able to integrate and use within their game preparations. La Liga also came up with a similar type of augmented reality that was unique to them, and they provided a lot of 3D graphics and insights on patterns of play and set pieces, as you see here on the screenshot, that indicated where a corner kick was being taken, whether it was short or into the 18-yard box or into the 6-yard box, and provided on-screen information as to how that would eventually take place. And it kind of opens up a new dimension to live game coverage. And I wondered if Jeremy could kind of add to that in terms of his experiences with new techniques and innovative broadcasting while he was at beIN Sports. And I know you had a segment specifically called Coach's Corner, usually with Thomas Rongan and Gary Bailey, on developing these kinds of and using these kinds of techniques.
Yeah, we use a statistical service called Opta, and what Opta allowed us to do is Opta provided all kinds of information for us in terms of data during live games, and so we were able to take that and integrate that into a graphics package that we would then use to kind of break things down in that Coach's Corner segment with Gary and Thomas, and they would they'd come up during the first half and say, okay, I want to break this down and break this down. And then during the broadcast, you're seeing a lot of what Alpha has in that slide there. It's just that you're getting those in-game graphics that give you more of a statistical feel. The funny thing about the beautiful game is that you can talk about shots, you can talk about shot placement, you can talk about possession, you can talk about where corner kicks are going to land, headers and all that stuff. But the beauty of the beautiful game is that it's very hard to predict that kind of stuff. You can see where the tendencies are, but from a broadcast point of view, I can't tell you how many analysts I had or Christian Vieri sit there and tell me, Jeremy, you don't know what you're talking about because you can't predict any of that. It's just when you go out there, what happens. You have to try, to make things happen, but it's so not predictive. But from a viewer standpoint, viewers love to see these kind of new innovations that can kind of put you into the live action, kind of like with the augmented reality, but then also with graphics like percentage, and even if they're taking a penalty kick, what kind of shot placement are you looking at? And then, as from my point of view as a broadcaster, in breaking this stuff down after the game or at halftime, or teeing up to another game, it helps to provide information for us that we can then relay to the viewer with our analysts, to break it down a little bit further, to give even better understanding of kind of not necessarily what could happen, but what has happened on the pitch.
Mm. And in recent years, we started to see broadcasters and leagues in union experiment with virtual reality, and in some cases, and in particular here on the screen, you see that CONCACAF has been using virtual sponsorships, and obviously in the past year with COVID interrupted leagues. These virtual ads have been showing up on screen, in the stands, and in various places across the field. So this type of virtual reality is now becoming very common across most soccer telecasts. You'll also notice that the Canadian Premier League did something very unique last year in their bubble in Charlottetown, is they had a company come up and create a virtual stadium, so that it's an entirely virtual environment that surrounds the field of play. And you see, obviously, you see channel promotion, you see sponsor promotion, and it's all a virtual setup, because where they played in Charlottetown is basically just kind of an open field. It just had a few individual seating areas, but there was no actual physical stadium. So what you're seeing there is a digital recreation of a virtual stadium, a stadium environment. So those are some of the innovations and techniques that have been built into a lot of soccer broadcasts over the course of the latter years anyway. In terms of how we watch the game, obviously we've all been consuming the game generally from our television sets, but more devices are coming into play, and we touched on this briefly earlier with the mobility aspect. But now you can watch games obviously on your computer, on your iPhone, on your tablet, and you can watch full games, you can watch highlights, you can watch pre and post game programming with player and coach media conferences. So you can have access to all of this programming in addition to the game, and really you can actually now become your own programmer. You can customize your own content based on what's available, and sometimes you can upload a game highlight. You could send it off to a friend of yours via Facebook or Instagram or various other platforms, and you can share that that aspect of the game that you want to be able to draw someone else into. There's also what's called the second screen option, in terms of being able to watch a game and also have access to certain data, and in some cases, data that is especially useful for those that are interested in betting and in the gaming aspect of the sport. And so this is another kind of aspect that is being worked into various broadcasts of other sports. In particular, the NFL is inheriting this type of access to sports betting. The other new, I think, or newish aspect of the coverage of soccer is these dedicated streams, and this type of application of specific cameras tracking players and even coaches. And Jeremy, I know that La Liga did this in particular with a broadcast of El Clasico between Barcelona and Real Madrid a couple of seasons ago, where they actually had cameras following Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Maybe you can give us kind of a background on how they were able to do that and how that was received.
Well, when I was at BN Sports, if you mention Messi or Ronaldo, it's an instant like uptick in viewers. If it's online, you get clicks. If it's like if you go to BN Sports' website, it's Messi and Ronaldo as much as possible. Like that's the way that we kind of looked at it. And then there was such a want for consuming that kind of information that we just decided that for El Clasico, let's put a camera on Messi, let's put a camera on Ronaldo, and let's just follow them around and see what happens during the game. And then we actually had a reporter. One of our reporters for La Liga do reports on both players. And, one report that we had into our news show that was on Messi, and another report that was on Ronaldo, showing the game footage of kind of what they did. And literally it was presented in such a way that it was like, okay, in the 49th minute, Messi didn't like the pass that he had received. So he gesticulated a little bit. Like it's literally that kind of granular information that's being provided just on these particular feeds, but the consumption is absolutely off the charts. You would then post that report online, or you would post highlights of what they did online, and it's unbelievable the influence and just the number of eyes that want to see Messi and Ronaldo. It's truly mind-boggling when you actually see the numbers. So obviously that then ticked off, okay, well, let's do this on a regular basis. And now we had a guy that was doing that every week. I mean, Ronaldo obviously went to Surreal, so we couldn't follow him anymore, but we had a guy every week who does a story on what Messi did in his particular game that week with a camera just trained on Lionel Messi. And it's one of those things that fans want to see.
Interesting. And this is actually something that's quite popular right now in Formula One. And many of you will notice that TSN has these bonus channels when they have Formula One coverage, and they have cameras fixed on specific cars, so you can actually follow a certain car throughout the course of a race. So this type of innovation, this type of technique is also being introduced in soccer now. And you also have the opportunity to now see the game from different vantage points. And there's dedicated streams using drones from an aerial view. And this is something that I noticed that was used just recently in the Italian Super Cup, which has now been rebranded as the PS5 Super Cup because their sponsor is now PlayStation 5. And given that association, they're now sort of taking these video game-like options and techniques and using them in live game coverage. So this was a kind of an interesting view. They used it quite often on replays, but I think this is something that will be introduced more frequently and certainly become part of the way we watch soccer from here on in. Our final section is who we watch, and of course, Jeremy and I, come from a time when really there was one main match of the week, and it was pretty much fixed, and it was predetermined, and it was set for you, and that was what you were going to watch on any given week. And for the time that I hosted Serie A soccer on TLN, that was essentially it. We had one game each week, generally the best available of the schedule. but that has obviously evolved to now become multiple games across multiple outlets. And in fact, TLN expanded its coverage from 1 game a week to 2 game a week to now sometimes having 4 games a day, never mind for a week. So you're looking at this cross section of games across so many different platforms. And obviously from, early on, when really men's soccer was all that essentially we could watch, because that's really all that there was an interest in terms of sponsorships and broadcasting. But now we can see virtually any version of the sport at any time, and women's soccer is becoming extremely popular. Both the NWSL and the FA Super League from the UK are now available here in North America. And in fact, the NWSL saw a 500% increase in television viewership in 2020. They staged that. They were actually the first soccer league to stage that bubble in Utah, and they played the Challenge Cup. And Jeremy, that was broadcast on CBS Sports.
Yeah, we were very proud to be able to take that on. And as you mentioned, they were the first sport that was back. Many people don't know that, but the NWSL was the first sport to come back after the COVID break, and a very successful bubble that they had out in Utah. And yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination of different things at that time. The fact that there just was no soccer, there was no sport. I think that people were, hungry for, certainly soccer fans, just hungry to see something. And so we were able to capitalize on that. Plus the popularity of the U.S. women's national team here in the United States continues to be, right on par with the U.S. men's national team. And of course, we've all heard about the legal fight that that the women's team is ongoing in terms of equal pay. But in terms of their level of success, it is greatly surpassed what the men's team has been able to do on the world stage. And I think that soccer fans are finally beginning to recognize that. And the quality of the women's game has improved as well. And so I think that it was a number of things that really came together to saw that, that kind of 500% jump. But the NWSL, was a huge success for us on CBS. And it was something that was a challenge. As mentioned, we really didn't know what was going to happen after COVID and how it was all going to work. But it actually turned out very well. And the NWSL as a whole, I think because they're a little bit of a smaller league, access was a little bit, a little bit easier in terms of, being able to get the players that you wanted to talk to, 6 feet apart than it would be in maybe MLS or another league. And so I think that helped with part of it as well. But yeah, it was a huge success for us. And, it continues to build, certainly the NWSL and the Women's FA Cup.
And beyond the women's game, we can obviously now have access to youth football, to futsal, to arena soccer, to beach soccer. And of course, every 4 years, the Olympics come around with a major soccer competition. And we have access to all of this soccer coverage at the moment. And of course, some of the teams and leagues have now their own dedicated channels. And I think perhaps Manchester United kind of pioneered that with MUTV. And of course, so many others have now joined them and have created these 24-hour, 7-day-a-week dedicated team and league channels where you can watch training sessions, you can watch interviews, you can watch various interviews and sidebar programming in addition to the games which are available on other broadcasters. But one interesting kind of new aspect to coverage is what is being called mega casting. And this is something I think the NFL experimented with and college football has done in the past, in whereby the same game is broadcast across several outlets with different on-air personalities to attract diverse audiences. And I think in the case of the NFL, which tried this with a wild card playoff game earlier this month, they had 4 different platforms. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had 4 different platforms. I think ABC had coverage of the game, then ESPN, and then they had something on ESPN Deportes, the Spanish language coverage. And then they had a 4th offering on Nickelodeon for kids in particular. Yeah. And maybe you can kind of expand on that, what that mega casting option is, having had, the opportunity also to work alongside Spanish language commentators at beIN Sports.
Yeah, one of the things I think it kind of they kind of saw what Amazon did. Amazon gave you the opportunity when they were doing NFL games to use different broadcast play-by-play teams, so you could actually choose your play-by-play team. And I think that they kind of just looked at that and thought, hey, you know what, maybe there is something here. And then ESPN, of course, I think they did it with the NFL Film Room, I think it was called, what they did with the wild card game, and you're basically seeing ex-pros sit there and watch the game, which is what we all want. I mean, I'm a football fan, American football fan as well. So, I mean, I tuned in and I watched that, and it's incredible to hear the insight of four different players. It's a different dynamic. Alf, you certainly know this. It's a different dynamic when you're doing play-by-play next to an analyst, because you're kind of working off of it. But when you have four ex-players that are basically just sitting around and watching the game and talking about it, it's a completely different experience for the fan and for the viewer. And I think it's something that was highly successful. I think we're going to see certainly more of it. We talked about doing that at BN Sports. It was something that we had talked about, is that during games, having some of our guys just sit around and watch the game and get their reactions to it, not necessarily on a separate stream, but certainly something that could be of benefit to the viewer. Maybe we show it later, or it's packaged up as something a little bit different outside of what we regularly do. But I think you're going to see more of that as you kind of move forward, going across different sports, because of the fact that it is such a successful thing. And if you can get 2, 3, 4 well-spoken former players that are willing to kind of sit there and give their opinions about it, I think it's something that could be very successful in terms of the consumption. And I think I could almost see a bit of a shift away. It's going to pull viewers from one part of your network to another part of your network, but you still have those consumers, which I think is what something like ESPN is looking at. What you don't want, obviously, is you don't want ESPN doing the NFL and then Fox having this all player type of thing, because then you're pulling the consumer to and fro. So I think, you want to kind of have it, if you're a network, that you have that option available to your viewers. They're not having to go somewhere else to consume that kind of content.
Exactly. And I think just to wrap up, we're obviously now starting to see the expansion of coverage of the game beyond just the game between the lines. And we're talking about the opportunity to go behind the scenes into documentaries and miniseries and even Hollywood movies, and league libraries are becoming more attractive as a source for new documentaries and behind the scenes or inside access shows to stream. And Jeremy spoke earlier about the Sunderland Till I Die program, and obviously there's this is a very popular one that Amazon has created, an original production called All or Nothing. Manchester City, there was a version involving them. This one, most recent one, involves Tottenham Hotspur, and so these are becoming very popular, and these are becoming ways to connect and maintain interest in the game through the course of the week between games. And then, of course, we've seen recently, and there's a Canadian connection to this, because Ryan Reynolds is a Canadian actor, and he's just partnered up with a fellow actor, and they've made a significant investment in Wrexham, which is a non-league team, a fifth tier football club that's based in Wales, and they've invested over $2.5 million in this club to kind of generate some promotion through a documentary, and they're banking on growing demand for sports content across various platforms. So this is kind of a new way of looking at soccer in terms of its appeal, and being able to kind of spin off the opportunity to actually create and generate original content from the investment in a football club. So just to wrap things up, I think, we can summarize by saying, really right now, the key word is choice. You really have a choice in terms of how you want to watch the game, where you want to watch the game, what you want to watch. You have the ability, I think, to become your own programmer. And that's, I think, what we're going to see in future, in the very near future, in fact. And a lot of things have been accelerated because of COVID and because of the interruption that we saw in sports this past year. A lot of innovations and a lot of new techniques and technologies have been accelerated because of that. And so we're starting to see many of these options available to us a lot sooner than I think perhaps we would have.
We have a question from one of our audience. It's asking that it's obvious that playing more soccer and being on the field more will help you become better developing your skills. What are your thoughts on a soccer player, a young soccer player, watching more games on TV? Do you think it'll help them become a better player? Just your own personal thoughts.
I think that's certainly, watching. I mean, I can only go back to when I was, when I was younger, when I was playing. Obviously, I watched and consumed as much as I could, and you try to emulate that. I think that depending on what you're watching, I mean, really, there are some teams and team sites now that, I mean, they're almost providing instructional type of material that young players can consume. I don't think there's any harm in, I mean, if you're watching Messi and you're out on the park, you're going to try to do something that Messi's going to do, and you're trying to sharpen up your skills. I think that it can certainly make you a better player in terms of how you study the game. The obviously, one of the famous Canadian examples was when Wayne Gretzky was a kid, and he would watch games with Walter, and he would sit there with a piece of paper and kind of just draw, where guys were going, where particular positions were going, and that's how he kind of tailored his game as he started to get into it and play and kind of play at the higher level. And so I think that in that way, if you're kind of studious about it, obviously it's going to certainly help you. But I don't see any harm, certainly, in watching the game and kind of trying to pick up pointers in ways that you can do. Flattery is the, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I think that holds true, certainly for athletics when it comes to watching soccer and trying to emulate that as well.
Yeah.
How important do you think, or sorry, go ahead, Alf.
No, I was only going to add to what Jared was saying in terms of players having not only access to games, but I know that a number of clubs are actively involved in developing videos, particularly for young players, to as challenges, for instance, and keep ups and various other types of training techniques that they can perfect. And a lot of the clubs, and again, this is as a result of COVID last year. A lot of the clubs became providers of videos and as a way to remain connected with their fan base, and in particular their younger fan base. So it was really an opportunity for young players to be even more involved with the game and with the players and teams that they follow.
Yeah, and I think with the social shift we're having, a lot more learning is visual, and I guess my question to both of you is, we got a lot of coaches out on this call, is how can a coach use some of these things we've discussed over the past hour? How can they bring it into their curriculum? So how can they use some of these things to help develop their players?
Well, if I can start, I mean, I think that all of the areas that we discussed are all relevant and essential for coaches that can take different aspects and implement them in what they do with their players on the field. For instance, probably some of the major clubs. And this obviously is going to depend on budgets and so on, but clubs do use those drones, for various aspects of game coverage, whether it's highlighting or spotlighting a certain player, or following a certain pattern of play. So that's an area that that's being explored, and there's some investment in that. And there, as we showed, some of the innovations and techniques that are being used in terms of how you view the game, and certain advanced tools that you can use as ways to analyze the game more and break it down and demonstrate it to your players. So all of these techniques that are generally being introduced in certain productions and broadcasts of games can be available in various formats to coaches to use within their own club systems.
And I also think just from a tactical standpoint, you have to see how the game is evolving, because obviously the game varies significantly from league to league in terms of style of play, and from team to team, and from player to player. Different managers coach their teams in different ways, and so I think that just from kind of watching where the game is going, nobody knows players like coaches do, and so coaches are going to know what their players are capable of and what their players are not capable of. So by kind of keeping an eye on what maybe some of the bigger teams are doing. I'm not going to say that you're going to be able to input Pep Guardiola's system into your team, but certainly you can kind of look at the kind of innovation that he's using, maybe some of the positional work that he's encouraging and that kind of thing, and maybe bring that down to your team, to your players, and to your level. So certainly from an evolution of the game, we've seen the game change significantly, not just in terms of consumption, but in terms of how it's played. Since Alf and I certainly started in this business, the game has changed quite a bit. So I think that just from that particular standpoint, you can glean a lot from just watching the game in terms of how the tactics are kind of laying out, from not just from team to team, but from league to league.
And I guess, even having those dedicated streams that BIN is having on Messi and stuff like that, it'll help coaches show their players what look at what these players are doing when they have the ball and when they don't have the ball. And it's good to show a midfielder or a defender or a striker, hey, this is what we're looking for from you, right? And somehow also trying to emulate that into your training sessions.
Yeah, just be careful though, Valerio, because if Messi's not having a good game, he's not doing much. That's not something you want to be showing your players.
Fair point.
We have another question. What do you believe is the future for local or TV or video opportunities in the amateur environments? Costs seem to be driving away opportunities for local clubs and sports facilities to highlight upcoming players and competitive opportunities.
Let me just start this off here, Alf. You can tail in on this, and this is something that we had talked about when we were kind of preparing for the presentation, is that I think that what you're going to see more of, certainly what I would encourage more of when I talk to young broadcasters and maybe like young producers and stuff, is that if you can produce feature material around your particular team that you can put on a team channel or a team website, that is going to be massive, not just for your fan base, but also for advertisers, for sponsors, people that want to be a part of what you're doing. And I mean, really, costs of video production are declining, because literally you can take your phone and shoot a high definition video. I mean, you see the Apple commercials all the time. You can shoot high definition video on your phone, on your iPad. I mean, I have a still camera that shoots in HD, and that was, I think, a couple $100. So the cost of video production has certainly come down as to what it was, even 5-10 years ago. So I think that from an amateur level, at a very, close to grassroots level, if you can find material that will allow you to produce something special for your club website or whatever, and literally, I mean, you can get editing software, fairly cheaply. Most Macs come standard with some form of video editing software. I know, because I've certainly used it and taken advantage of it. Or you can go with high-end Adobe, depends on how what kind of bells and whistles you want to put in there. But I mean, literally, you can take your phone and shoot a feature piece. It might take a little bit of time to put together, but once you get it sorted out, you'll find that you'll be able to turn it around very quickly. And I think that that's something that certainly I would encourage at the amateur level. No matter what your team is, whether you're playing in a beer league or whether you're playing in, the Canadian Premier League, the technology is there now for everybody. Everybody has access to that technology to be able to shoot really good quality material and turn it around quickly for very little cost.
Yeah, and if you don't necessarily have the skills, or you don't feel confident, there are services now that will do that for you. There are a number of services across Canada, certainly that I'm aware of, that actually will provide those services of video highlights of players who are looking to be recruited and looking to to extend their careers either through college or various other levels. And there are, a number of services that that cater specifically to the amateur player and amateur club. So there's all kinds of services now that that will do that for you and provide that opportunity for coaches, players, and clubs alike.
Perfect. Alf, Jeremy, it's been a very interesting and educational last hour. I've learned a lot, and I think our viewers have learned a lot, and how we can consume and watch the game, and also how coaches can start using some of this stuff into their own curriculum. So thank you, both of you, very, very much for your time and for this wonderful presentation. To those of you that have missed our presentation today, it'll be up on our website at www.nscac.ca in our members only section. If you're not a member yet and would like access to all that, please visit our website or go to our YouTube channel. Our next NSCAC Behind the Bench is next Wednesday. I'll be sitting down with Anthony Capitosto, the Academy Director at Toronto FC, and we'll be discussing the TFC methodology and their curriculum and what they're looking for in terms of players. So coaches, if you're looking for another avenue of where to put your player, jump in on that. But Alf, Jeremy, thank you very much for your time, and it was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks, Valerio, for the invitation, and a shout out to all the NSCAC members. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.